Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast.
Today, I'm joined by Raphaël Ognar, CEO and co-founder of NKILT Therapeutics, a new cell therapy biotech developing a novel approach to engineering immune cells, starting with natural killer cells to directly target leukemias and solid tumours. In this episode, we'll be talking about the harsh realities of funding and manufacturing cell therapies, why the current CDMO pricing model is broken for emerging biotechs, and what needs to change if we want innovation to survive in this space. Raphaël, let's start with your background. How did you get to where you are today?
Thank you for having me, Dora, and I'm very pleased to engage in this pretty sensitive topic for many companies like ours. So I've been working in the pharma and biotech industry for now 29 years. I'm a scientist by training, but I never worked as a scientist. I actually have a career that is mostly focused initially on marketing, from launching drugs to getting more on the strategic marketing globally. Then I moved to drug development, where I cut my teeth on the full process of bringing drugs from discovery all the way to approval and commercialization. And the last section of my corporate experience was focusing on the corporate strategy aspects to understand how to lead and govern companies, having the chance of working with extremely great leaders, CEOs, CFOs of large pharma companies. And then when I reached a point where I felt I was ready to start something different, I moved out of corporate pharma and created first a consulting boutique where I was focusing on early stage biotechs, trying to bring to early founders of biotechs, and with a focus specifically on immuno-oncology and cell therapy, try to bring them my experience and give them some directional advices and support for them to move forward to the next milestone. And through that journey, I met a great set of people, of which a couple became my co-founders for NKILT. We came with an idea that was really created by us. It's not coming out of academia. And so NKILT is the pure product of a couple of crazy brains that thought that we needed to try to address some of the challenges of cell therapy in order to bring more options to cancer patients.
That sounds exciting. So tell us about NKILT then. What are you building?
Yes, so NKILT is focused on a pretty classic approach in cell therapy, which is to engineer our immune cells. But the main module we put behind is that the current approach that has been approved across multiple products, which is autologous CAR T, has been a humongous breakthrough. It really changed many of the aspects of medicine. It's the epitome of personal medicine. But it comes with some severe issues and challenges, started by the overall cost that it brings to the table. And this cost is essentially related to the manufacturing aspect. And the main other challenge is that when you use an autologous technology, you have one shot to develop your drug, because you take the immune cells from the patient, you engineer them, and then you bring them back. If anything goes wrong in the process, you're done. Your product is not going to be optimal potentially, and sometimes even unable to get back to the patients. And on top of all this, there are a lot of other biological imitation that we can find. I'm not going to go in those details. Our approach is to finally really move to the era of allogeneic, a little bit like what we did in the past when we decided to use allogeneic transplants, for example. There were a lot of challenges, of course, but today it's a procedure that is used very frequently and has very good benefits. It's specific to some type of patients in the heme disease, for example, but it's something that has been mastered by all the experts in our industry. We think it's time for allogeneic technologies in cell therapy to shine and to move forward. And the biggest benefit for us of using such approach is that you have multiple options to develop your cells and not just one shot for each patient. So yes, it comes with other challenges. Some are biologic, some are physiologic, some are manufacturing related. But we have always proven as an industry that when we get in front of a challenge, we found a way to solve it. So we believe it's time to advance, and our technology is based on using healthy donor cells, so the strongest possible cells that you can have, immune cells you can have, engineer them with our unique and patented technology, and then have them stored, cryopreserved, ready to go when a patient that would be eligible could be receiving them. The one last point I will make about our technology is that it is solely focused on one target, which is called HLA-G, which is a very interesting target and clearly understudied in cancer. It's a potent immunosuppressant that shuts down the immune system. It's what actually the placenta uses to shut down the immune system of the mother to not kill the baby that is growing. So it's pretty efficient in shutting down the immune system. Unfortunately, cancer cells are using this molecule to shut down the immune system across almost every type of tumors. So it's a perfect target for us to be able to go after a large population having cancer like colorectal, breast, prostate, kidney, things that you cannot do with an autologous technology from a pure manufacturing scaling.
That does sound really fascinating. I could ask you a million follow-up questions there about the science, but for the sake of this, the PharmaSource podcast, which is focused on the CDMO bio relationship, let's talk about the manufacturing. So you're early stage, but you've talked to over 30 CDMOs in the past couple of years. Tell us about those conversations. What did you expect to find when you started reaching out to CDMOs, and what was the reality?
Yeah. So first, I will say I'm not the CDMO or the manufacturing expert. I have a team behind me that has that expertise. I can always say I'm just the CEO. There are people that have expertise behind me and by my side. But the main goal first is that obviously we have identified a path forward from the manufacturing standpoint. We have a couple of key elements that needs to be developed. We are engineering our cells and transducing with a gamma retrovirus technology, which is not necessarily what most people do. Most people use an antivirus today. But there's a very simple reason for us is number one, we are using as a first set of products, the natural killer cells as the immune cells to go after cancer. We can debate whether it's the best choice, but for an allogenic approach, it's probably the easiest to go after, considering their specific profile that make them better for an allogenic approach. The main focus for us is to use these gamma retrovirus because my team has very strong expertise in that field. And we had really great results with the transduction with such approach. So we need to then bring this to the GMP level. So the virus integration is something that requires a GMP approach, of course, like every manufacturing piece and manufacturing element. And so that's the first step for us to move forward. And then you go on the cell manufacturing, expansion, scalability, and all this, which we are not yet there. So our first focus was really identifying people that could help us on that virus. On going with gamma retro, we started to realize that most, when I say most, is almost all of the people we were talking to didn't have expertise in using gamma retrovirus. They were all playing lentivirus, which I can understand. And I even had people say, we can adapt your technology to lenti. And yes, we can, but it's not necessarily what we want to do at this stage. We decided to persist and identified a few that were very good, apparently with good records. So we started to stick to those. But then comes the discussion about the cost and about the process and all this. And the requirement for us to be able to initiate such process are pretty cost impactful. There is no way I can start this if I don't have $5 million in the bank. And it's not going to be news to you or to whoever is listening to us. Currently, early stage biotech, not so many of them can clinch that they have 5 million in the bank. So that's the first limiting factor. Of course, it's all about negotiation, discussion, and my job as a CEO with my team is to raise more money to be able to do it. But this is really astonishing to see how much money is required to do something that some academic center can do for a significantly lower amount of money, which is also a path that we could be considering, obviously.
So the PharmaSource podcast has over 200 episodes now, and it's very clear that for biotechs engaging with CDMOs, cost is the primary factor. With pharma companies, it can be a bit different, actually. So if you were advising CDMOs on how to work with companies at your stage, what would you tell them to do differently?
So first, I will go back a little bit to a few years ago by emphasizing that cell therapy used to be the hottest topic and the hottest field in biotech. A few years ago, you would raise your hand and say, hey, I need money. And you say, what are you doing, cell therapy? Oh, yeah, here are a few $1 million. And I'm exaggerating, but actually, I'm really not. There was a time where just by mentioning the incredible outcome that we wanted to achieve with technologies like ours, people will be so interested, excited, and will really put money in. Times have changed for multiple reasons, and I don't want to go into the rabbit hole of who is responsible or what. It's just that, like every challenge, it's a mix of different elements that led to multiple unsolved, and that made many investors losing faith in what cell therapy can provide. The other key issue is that the autologous therapy currently, if you look, most of them, not to say all of them, are commercialized and managed by big pharma. And there's probably a reason. It's because it's not profitable, because the cost of goods and the cost of manufacturing, the inability to scale broadly and to large extent, makes it very difficult to be cost effective and profitable. And this is where I am strongly convinced that allogeneic technology can help in improving that aspect. I don't think we can continue over and over to develop therapies that are going to cost $500,000 or more, and with the risk of having some really challenges coming through the manufacturing process. We should try to find other options, and at the end, we always should try to find additional options. So in a context like this, today, when we would try a product 5-7 years ago in cell therapy and it would not work, well, it's okay, we'll just try another one and we'll find a way to fundraise and we'll get another 10 million behind whatever new product we create, and it's going to move forward. Today, it's not the case. Investors have lost faith in what can be delivered. They don't trust the model anymore for most of them. And so we need to build a new narrative, and we need to show and prove that some of our approach can be successful, some of our approach can be profitable. Because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, it's a business. We're trying to cure cancer for patients, or at least to keep them cancer-free. But if we're losing money, there's no future. There's just no future on it, because the world is based on a capitalistic model, which is about making profit. There's no other way. So we have to find ways to make profit one way or the other. So all the environment has changed. And on top of this, some additional headwinds of the overall global economy and all this didn't help either. So we need to have a few successes. So the science needs to deliver. That's the first thing. And once the science deliver, then we need to have the economical aspect coming back together, and maybe we need to build new economic models to show that there is a way of making money, that it's not going to happen overnight. And that's one of the other key aspects, is that there's so many investment opportunities for a venture today that can convert much faster than a biotech that's going to take 7 to 10 years before you can have your money coming back. So it's not the ideal scenario, but I think it is possible. And part of our responsibilities as executives of the biotech field is to rebuild a narrative that will bring the investors back to the table and make them able to support the work. Because to deliver the science, you need to do science. To do science, you need money. So no secret. So it's this kind of a chasing your tail aspect, or chicken and egg, no matter how you want to call it. But we need to bring back more investments, and we need to build a trust that we can pull it off.
What you said earlier reminded me of a conversation I had a couple of months ago about the biotech funding space, where she said that a few years ago, there was a time where money did grow on trees. Now that is not the case, obviously. How do you manage those capital constraints with conversations with CDMOs? How can you ensure a balance between cost savings, but also making sure that your project is going to be a priority for those CDMOs?
So interestingly, we live in continuous tension, because to be able to have these conversations, it takes longer than it used to. If I have plenty of money in the bank, I don't need to negotiate every single point and say at some point, it's okay. I'm okay with this. Let's move on. We just paid a big bill and we advance, which I don't like, because I don't think it's good practice. You should always negotiate and identify the best possible path for both partners, because at the end of the day, it has to be a partnership. The other key thing is that one of the benefits, if I would say, about those extensive conversations is that because I am convinced that success in manufacturing cell therapy also resides in having a true partnership, and it's building a path forward together. It's not just us contracting. I hate the term of CDMO because it has that contracting aspect. Okay, I'm going to hire you. You're going to deliver what I'm telling you to deliver, and then we move on. But the level of complexity of what we're managing, in my view, requires much more than just a contract that you sign and say, please deliver. And if you don't, oh, you're bad, you're going to have penalties, and that's it. No, it's a little more complex in my views. So there's a lot of components when you have to spend time to negotiate, where you realize, are they really the people we want to work with? And it's valid on the other side. They could be also realizing, do we really want to put our foot into this type of technology or whatever? So I see it as a potential benefit. But again, in that situation, time is against us. The more time we take, the more money we burn until we get to the next milestone. So the more complicated it is, particularly if you have limited funding. So you need to go fast. And if you go too fast, you can stumble and fall. And then if you fall, you need to restart. If you restart, you need more money. So we continuously playing that game. You mentioned that there was a time when money was growing on trees. Yes, there was a time like this, but it's not our time today. So we can keep talking about it. Not going to change that to today's situation. So what we're doing now when we engage, and the reason why we're talking still to so many different CDMOs, that we really want to get the angle of partnership and say, listen, I know you need to make money. I need to move to the next phase. So how can we find the proper way to make that happen? The other key thing that I noticed, and may not make a lot of friends by saying this, is that because of that era when money was easy, there are a lot of biotechs that got created. There are a lot of CDMO that got created. And suddenly before you had the big players, you had the really big guys. We all know the big manufacturing groups that are existing. And they were very successful. Many of them brought a lot of innovation. It was great. But then you started to have boutique ones, local ones specialized in whatever specific technology, and it was growing. And then suddenly, instead of talking to 10 people, you have 50 people in front of you that you can talk to, which is great. But when you don't have money fueling the entire system, if I don't get money, I don't contract a CDMO. If CDMOs cannot contract, they're going to die. So we're going to die, they're going to die. So I think there is, and it's actually happening, there is a concentration that is happening in the overall field. Many biotechs are disappearing, unfortunately. Some good technology, some maybe not as good. But I think also in the CDMO field, some are going to disappear because there's just not enough opportunities to feed all the mouths that are now ready to move forward. Part of our job is to identify the one that will be solid enough to move forward, and also very clear on how they want to move forward, hence the partnership approach, which I think is going to increase the chances of success.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about that. CDMOs might have excess capacity because investment has dried up, but companies like yours still can't access those services. How did we end up here?
It's probably multifactorial. I would just say that, to be honest, sorry, I don't want to ditch your question, but it's a little bit about, it doesn't matter how did we arrive there. At the end of the day, this is where we are. And yes, some companies are very successful and they still can move on. But I can tell you, I hear a lot of nice stories. And for one nice story, there are probably 100 that are not nice at all. I talk to a lot of my peer CEOs in the field of, again, I'm going to niche this, early stage cell therapy. People don't want to put money in it. They're afraid. They don't trust that we can make it. They still believe, and that's one of our biggest challenge. They still think, oh, cell therapy, you're not profitable. Manufacturing is impossible. It costs to hell. When I work with some people, some investors, and I discuss and I say, this is my budget to bring my first product to the clinic and then do the clinical trial. I said, there's no way you can do that at that cost. Yes, there is way. Times are changing. Technology is evolving. But of course, we need to prove it. It's easier to say, if I do another autologous CAR T targeting CD19, I know it works. But there's no market for that anymore. There's no patients available to be able to use such technology. We have already enough on the field, in my views. Time is to go for new targets, new approaches that differentiates, that bring other opportunities for the patients. The other thing also is that unfortunately, those autologous CAR T, as good as they are, and the results are really impressive in many of the diseases that are approved, but most of those diseases, not to say all, are really niche, really small. You can try to push this as much as you can. Today, I don't see any cell therapy targeting breast cancer. I don't see cell therapy targeting colorectal. These are diseases that have large patient populations that require new treatments. I am currently talking with different academic centers for potential partnerships, particularly one for the GI diseases, the gastrointestinal diseases. And they say, there's so many of our patients, once they progress under the first couple of rounds of treatments that we can give them, they're done. There's nothing happening. They're going to die of their disease quickly, and they're going to progress, and that's going to be it. And we're talking about diseases that we know for so long and that are still essentially treated with chemotherapy. So we have a lot of things ahead of us to do. And I think cell therapy could be one of the options to go after. Not the only one, but it's one of it. So it's important to really be out, showcase what you're doing. But on the other side, people need to understand that the only way we can prove our point is to do the studies. To do the studies, we need some form of funding. And to prove that when we say you claim A, B, and C, we need to show it, but I cannot just put it off my sleeve. I need to do a study and say, this is how it happened. And sometimes the study is going to confirm, and sometimes it's not. But it doesn't mean that it's dead. It's just that we are knowing better how to move forward. And I think the knowledge in science is there, just that maybe not all the science is shared to be able to continue to learn and grow.
Is it that kind of cycle of you need results to attract funding, but you need funding to get results?
Yeah, this is where we are. We turn in circles currently. I'm currently raising not so much money, actually. I'm raising 10 million. I need a little bit of a bridge before because I'm running short in cash. But when you think about 10 million, there are people that are raising like 100 million and they get it, but they're not in cell therapy. And so there also people say, look at those mega deals done by pharma, whatever. That never benefits early stage. You can say whatever you want. I'm sorry, but the fact that a big pharma is spending $3 billion on a new technology, that's not going to help me, unless I'm the one that is receiving the $3 billion. Currently, we're on mega deals. That's a cycle. We need to be able to restimulate the kind of smaller money, earlier stage, multiple bets. Again, it still exists, but there was time where you had a lot of people you could talk to. Today, it's really a very significant small amount of people that are interested in doing this.
I know in our last conversation, you said that you were aiming for an IND filing, but you've already been delayed by over a year because of funding.
Mm-hmm.
Are you optimistic that funding will return to this space?
I don't know if I can say optimistic, but I know that we are doing everything possible to stimulate that direction and to be able to get some funding and move forward. So I think it's optimistic will be a little bit exaggerated, but I am convinced that with good technology and with the proper interaction with the right people, we can make it happen. We have changed a few aspects of our approach from a fundraising standpoint. We also look more for the partnership approach, which I believe is essential. If 10 of us are running after the same small group of investors and they're only going to give money to one, we need to rethink about this, because competition is great, but if competition comes at the cost of killing 9 great technologies to just push one, we're doing something wrong. That's not competition at the end. So there are many things that needs to be improved on our side, but I am hopeful that we can find the right people in our path and little by little bring back steadily the opportunity to build our technology. I will just say one thing that is really crucial here. It's not about me. It's not about NKILT. It's not about even the specifics of our technology. It's about identifying a way to commonly believe that what we're doing can get to a patient. Once it gets to a patient, it's a different story. We need to get to the patient because this is the only way we're going to prove our point. But it's very interesting how the same people that 10 years ago would be investing in 20 companies and say, hey, we're going to surely have 2 or 3 of them that are going to make it, and this is how we're going to have our payback. But today the economics are different, and that model doesn't seem to be any more valid or attractive. So it's easier, or it's maybe more lucrative to invest in mega deals that come out pretty much faster, and you don't have your money stuck for a decade before you have something happening. I get that. But at some point, if we don't source our future treatments, in 5-10 years, there's going to be nothing to invest in. At least maybe in some fields, but not in the fields in which we are. It's always a shared thing. We need to do our part. Investment community needs to do their part. The academic centers need to do their part. And I am a believer that working together is going to improve. So back to the manufacturing thing, if we just look at CDMOs as contracting companies, I don't think we're going to be successful in our story. I am looking now to identify exactly out of those 30 plus groups that I have talked to, is which one do we feel we want to embark for the next decade? And we need to have them thinking the same and saying, when we go with those guys, the idea is that we're going to be probably in a decade still with them. How do we make that happen? How do we successfully deliver something together so everybody comes out with a smile on their face and a positive outcome and the satisfaction that we built a new treatment that can help patients?
Absolutely. A mutually beneficial strategic partnership. But earlier you did say that manufacturing challenges are the biggest reason cell therapy fails, not just the science, but the manufacturing. Can you explain more about that?
First, there are a lot of technologies that have very unique specificities, which is a little bit I was contributing actually recently to a webinar with some of my colleagues in the field of actually manufacturing, but also overall cell therapy. And we were realizing how sometimes the unique aspect of what we're developing could be a limiting factor. Because to convince people that what we do makes sense, you need to show that you're different. You need to show that, what you bring is better than the others. First, we will never know that it's better until we get to the finish line. At the current stage where we are, we can say, hey, my in vitro data looks better than yours. Yeah, great. Doesn't mean anything at the end, but it shows that the technology in vitro is better. Then you go to animal model. Oh yeah, my animal model looks really nice and it's proving something. It looks better than X, Y, and Z. Yes, I can move forward. Yeah. If we have cured cancer in all mice that could exist, and yet we are not there in human beings. So it's an important set of milestones to validate the different pieces of a technology. But the only final word comes to what we do in patients and how it looks in patients. So, like I said, science needs to deliver, and science can fail. It happens. And if it fails, that's the game. My responsibility as a CEO of a company is to ensure that whatever outcome we have is positive and we go forward to patients and then we prove in the clinic that we're successful. Or the other outcome, which we have to be ready to accept, is that it fails. But if it fails, it should only fail because it's biologically impossible to succeed, not because we didn't have the money to do whatever important study, not because we didn't do the right process for manufacturing, not because we couldn't find an agreement between two partners. These are all wrong reasons for a project to fail. Unfortunately, there are many often reasons that are the results of the failing outcome. I always say, give a chance for our technology to fail or succeed, but let's us having only that question on the table and not all the others that will be very frustrating if we can't deliver something because of a technical aspect that is nothing to do with the science. So it's a little bit kind of maybe it's a world that doesn't exist, but I still want to believe that, again, when we go back to the partnership approach, when we work together on saying, how can we make that work? And in a way that is reasonable, let's be sure that we identify all the risks that we have, we assume those risks, and then we move on and we mitigate them with all the knowledge and the expertise that we have.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you think we can mitigate some of those kind of points? Biotechs and CDMOs or manufacturing facilities working together earlier to build manufacturability into product design?
That's actually a really good point. I really believe that the earlier you address some of the key questions related to manufacturing, the better it's going to be. And we need to also remember that manufacturing is more and more in the cell therapy space done by academic centers also. They build their own capabilities. And I think they come with an advantage when they do, is that when you have a lab in whatever big academic center that is bringing a new technology, if you have in the same place someone that can start looking at how they're going to eventually use this technology, if they do it right, they could have a significant edge versus a technology that is created. We validate the science, and then we move to talk to a CDMO. Then we have to tech transfer what we do in our lab to the CDMO. They have to replicate, make it work. And then they have to do everything that needs to go to get to GMP. Again, this is not as simple as I describe it, but there are multiple steps, and that takes time. If it takes time, it takes money. So we're back to the same story. When we speak about partnerships, they could be broader than just one thing. I'm going to partner with an academic center to do some of my in vivo studies, or I'm going to partner with then a CDMO to do some of the virus work, and then another CDMO to do the cell manufacturing. And then this is becoming like an incredibly complex story. If there are ways to concentrate some of the aspects, we should do it. On the other hand, putting all your eggs in the same basket is always risky. It's a dance. I really consider this as a dance. And I will believe that finding a right partner early on to work together increases your chance of moving forward faster. I will just say one thing, because we talk about manufacturing, besides the lack of funding, besides the challenges that we have, the potential science challenges that we will face, the tech transfer aspect is what really keeps me awake at night. I really believe that, unfortunately, every time you have to move things from one hand to another set of hands, you take a risk of something going wrong. So the earlier you have people involved in your process, the more chance you have to move forward without having to transfer to someone else. And that, I think, to me, is the ideal scenario. But if I want to do this, it means I need someone that has capabilities to do small manufacturing all the way to commercial manufacturing. And that's the big ones. If I go to a large manufacturing company, how appealing am I going to be for them? I have no business today. I'm going to be like a very small in terms of benefits for them short term. They're better off contracting Pfizer, Novartis, Roche, or whoever that have millions of drugs to be produced. Why would they waste their time with us, where we have this tiny little indication, or this, and some not indication, this little technology today that may be big tomorrow, but today unproven and significant. So for them, it's a balancing act also. And I just hope that we can find the right partners to be able to go all the way to the finish line. I think we can. I think we have identified the ones that we want to work with. It's just to finalize the discussion with them.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. But going back to the tech transfer pain point you mentioned, conversation after conversation, tech transfer comes up as the thing that keeps people awake at night. Actually, our event, CDMO Live Europe, we're running a biotech CMC bootcamp to help biotechs like yourself navigate some of those issues. But back to when you mentioned working with CDMOs earlier, how in that early relationship do you balance protecting your IP with that sort of collaboration?
Yeah, that's also a very sensitive topic. I will tell you, I'm not going to say what we're doing. I'll tell you what I would love what people should be doing. But is that we should be less constrained by this IP story. This is part of, I was mentioning earlier that I was contributing to a webinar a few weeks ago, which was really very exciting and very interesting, where it was literally about like how this whole IP game might be actually more a constraint for innovation than anything else. And yes, of course, we need to protect our technology, because you don't want anybody that can read and identify what you're doing. And then if they have money that you don't have, they can beat you. But first, if that has to happen, it has to happen. And there's nothing I can really do about this. I can do all the protection I want. We are doing everything we can. There's always someone that's going to figure out something and try to eventually leapfrog and beat you to the finish line, because that's human nature. So we cannot change that. But I believe that if we go with a mindset, with the ones that want to work together, and again, I feel like I'm a little bit repeating myself, but this is where the partnership makes sense, is that if we work together, yes, we can lose together, but we can win together. And just remove greed from the picture a little bit, if we could. Unfortunately, I think this world cannot, but if we could remove greed a little bit, it is better to share a pie that is going to be a pie of success versus owning everything that's not going to go anywhere. We always have this crazy thing about it's better to have a multi-billion-dollar business than 100% of nothing. I always have that in mind, that instead of seeing everybody as competitors, see them as challengers, and it's slightly different. Challenger is someone that can challenge you, but if you have a conversation, maybe you can work together. Maybe you can become partners. Maybe suddenly, instead of both fighting for the same thing, going together will increase the chances of being successful. All this thing about IP is that protect your thing. I think we need to work as an ecosystem to adjust some of the approaches that the IP system brings, because there are some limitations that are difficult to go around. But sometimes there are things that it's okay to give away and not necessarily keep for yourself, because there's so many patents that are delivered every year, millions of them. They're not millions of technologies that are making blockbuster status. And this is beyond just biotech. It's on everything. Protecting something for the sake of protecting it is great. It doesn't mean you cannot release. It doesn't mean you cannot say, yes, we have an IP on this, but we'll be fine if working with company X unleashes something much bigger. And the only way is to compromise on a little piece of the IP that we have. Let's do it, because at the end of the day, we will be successful. But you need to rework the mindset. You as the CEO, you need to go to your board and say, hey, we're going to work with those guys, and we have to accept that they're going to use our technology, so they're going to know how we do it. Are we okay with this? And it's always difficult. But I think it's about changing the mindset of working together more than working separately. I'm going to say an anecdote that is incredible, and I'm not going to say who and what and how. When I was talking about some companies that are moving forward and suddenly you discover that they have a drug that is almost about to be approved and there is no data whatsoever coming out. And I was saying that how come you never shared some of the data that you delivered that could be helpful for people to realize that there's something happening, and maybe you have done things that we are doing and that were unsuccessful, and we are just doing, and it's stupid because it's going to be unsuccessful. And the person responded to me with a very dry approach and saying, first, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying that it is something that could happen, is that if I have all the cash that I need to develop a program and I can go to the finish line without talking to anybody, it's not my problem, it's the other's problem. If I'm successful, my people are going to be happy. If you cannot learn from my success and failure, it's your problem, it's not mine. So why do I care? But this is particularly bad and dry, but believe me, it's real. In our industry, some people are just doing things to be successful, which we should all do. But I believe that we have a better chance of bringing new cancer treatment, which is what I focus on, to patients by working together, instead of having, yes, I know I'm on something great and I know I'm going to be successful. I'm not going to share because I'm going to take everything. That is back to what I was saying. That's greed. That is just greed. To be sure, look at me, I'm the one that succeeded, you all failed. And I did everything to be sure that you will never be able to replicate what I'm doing. I don't believe in that model. Maybe I'm a lunatic, but I just don't believe in that model. I think it's just a few benefiting versus another option where we can have more benefiting.
Yeah, so creating collaboration, not just with CDMOs, not just with academic centers, but even with your challengers to raise up the field as a whole.
If I work with people in NK cells, I'm going to take a very simple example. My peers working in NK cells. Most people say NK cells don't work. First, it's not true. When you say NK cell doesn't work, they give you 2 or 3 examples and they say, yeah, and how about all the other examples that you don't talk about that have been so far successful, maybe not to the same degree that we wanted to be successful. And then most of the time they say it doesn't work. You say, show me the data. Oh, but no, there's no data. Also, there's no data, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. No data doesn't mean it doesn't work, but just that belief, it doesn't work. Okay. If one of us shows something that works, and then another one say, hey, you see, they did this, that's smart. We can actually learn from that. And then the second one start to work. And then the third one, and then the fourth one. And then we have 10 NK cell technologies that are moving to the clinic, showing benefit to patients. I'm sorry, there is enough cancer patients for all of us to make money. If I want to be dry and really like baseline on the money. So far, cancer continues to kill patients every day and millions of them. So we can have multiple technologies. We can have multiple treatment. We can have, when I see, and I'm not going to blame whatever, but that some technologies that make 25 billion revenue per year or $30 billion revenue per year in cancer, it means that you could also have, instead of one drug making 30 billion, you can have 3 drugs making 10 billion, and it's already a lot of money. We can tend to forget what we're talking about. Billions of dollars, not millions, billions. And maybe 3 drugs making 3 options for patients. And maybe they're going to all make money. Maybe not 30 billion, but enough. So I think it's all about like thinking what we want as a model. Do we want to have options so patients can get multiple shots? Or do we want to say, hey, this is the one that you want? It's going to be good for you for a couple of years. And then if it doesn't anymore, not too bad. You tried. Again, I'm very sarcastic here, but it's really important for us to reconsider what is the goal of what we're doing. We're doing a business, so the goal is to make money. I get that. But if I cannot bring something that helps patients, I have 0 chance of making money. 0. If I bring a drug that's going to help patients, and if my work helps company X, Y, and Z to bring another drug that can help even that same patient, then we are on the right path. And then everybody's going to be satisfied at the end.
So as a final closing note then, despite funding challenges, the manufacturing bottlenecks, the market downturn, you're obviously still passionate, still motivated about cell therapy. Why?
Because I'm crazy. No, I think, so first, like I said in the beginning, the one size fits all, I don't believe in it. So what we're doing in cell therapy is just one piece of the puzzle. Other technologies, other companies are doing an incredible work. And I really want to recognize all the efforts. I also want to recognize, because currently the world has a tendency of being in denial of science. Science has brought us where we are. Medicine has allowed us to live until we are 80, 90 years old. Have to remember, 75 to 80 years ago, people would die at 30, 40, 50 years old. There are even some places in the world that don't have the access to medicine that we do that are dying very young. We have to remember that. So in a world that has a tendency of considering that if you say something 5 times and you scream louder than the others, what you say is right. No. Science comes with a rigorous process. We even prove sometime a decade after that what we said a decade ago was wrong. That's the beauty and the difficulty of science. But it doesn't mean that we didn't benefit. You always use an example. There was a drug called Avastin in breast cancer that was approved on a phase 2 trial. And after a very long series of phase 3, it was removed from the market for that specific indication because the phase 3 never delivered the results that the phase 2 delivered. But if you work in oncology for a long time, patients that benefited from that drug, it's just that statistically it didn't work well enough to validate further. And did we do wrong to approve earlier? Talk to those patients that had benefit from it and tell them why if we didn't approve this, you would not have had that drug. So it's very complicated. But I truly believe that cell therapy is an open gate to the treatment of tomorrow. We are already moving into in vivo delivery. We'll probably see actually most of the mega deals in this. The only really deals happening in cell therapy are on in vivo delivery. And I am a believer of that. But I also know that it took us so long to get the first CAR T don't believe that in vivo delivery is going to come in the next couple of years and that's it. We're going to solve all the problem and this is the next generation of treatment. There's going to be a lot of setbacks. There's going to be some successes and a lot of setbacks. But the variability we can bring in terms of tackling cancer with cell therapy is almost endless. And I believe in that approach, that you understand the science to a degree that we never did. We're doing things today that 20 years ago, people were laughing when we were discussing those ideas. I remember the time before the first CAR T came where people were saying, this is never going to work. This is completely stupid. Even some saying, you're trying to play God by manipulating the immune system. You're not going to be able to take anything and whatever. I even remember a lecture from Professor Rosenberg at ACR when he was receiving a big award there, where he was sharing his notes from the 70s with FDA. They were calling him witch. Okay. So times are evolving. People are having ideas today that we may find stupid in a decade. But those ideas are the one that led us to find maybe the next breakthrough. We always need to be humble in front of what we're doing. And I think cell therapy has opened a new set of fields for us to discover how the human body works, how the immune system works, and how by leveraging our own defense mechanism that are pretty sophisticated when you think about it, leveraging this in order to tackle diseases overall is probably a very good way, instead of bringing something from outside, like a chemical or whatever drug, to change or to kill whatever is making the problem. And there's a tiny line that we cannot cross between changing what a human being is. But I am a believer that the understanding we are having through the cell therapy process is going to give more options to treat more diseases that we could even not think ever touching in today.
Thank you, Raphaël, for your time today and your insights. It's been really interesting. And I do hope to see NKILT Therapeutics on the market someday soon.